All the times where we've been up in the stock market for 6 months, it's happened 6 times since like 1928, we keep going higher. Great.
All right, so sticking on economic boom, one person who thinks we're about to have an economic boom in crypto is Tom Lee. So he went on CNBC talking about 200K Bitcoin, $7,000 Ethereum price. What's going on? Is it possible?
Well, you know what? When Tom Lee gets up there, you know, like you ever seen the video of Babe Ruth calling a shot from home plate? You ever remember, you know, LeBron James? He takes the powder in his hands and he throws it up in the air, right?
Before he shoots a three.
Yeah, he points to the floor. You know, Michael Jordan, you see that tongue hanging out, right? You see Kobe, right? All of a sudden, you just see him give a little shimmy and he's got the turnaround jumper with the fadeaway, right? You just like that person was made to do that. That's Tom Lee. When Tom Lee walks onto the CNBC set, it is like a great taking his seat, doing great things. Being bullish is what Tom Lee does. And guess what? He don't just show up and just be like, I think everything's going up. He shows up with data. And what he described is, he says, okay, all the times where we've been up in the stock market for 6 months, it's happened 6 times since like 1928, we keep going higher. Great. You know who else says that? Ryan Dietrich. You know who else is pretty bullish? Is Adam Kobesi. You know who else is bullish? Is Charlie Bolello. All these people who are independent minded, they all seem to come to the same conclusion. You know, the people who are not coming to that conclusion is people who are perma bears. I mean, Peter Schiff, I love that man to death, but that man has been predicting 9 of the last 4 recessions, and so he's wrong. And then you go and you take a look at a bunch of these other people, and they just follow the crowd. All of a sudden, their stockbroker calls and says, hey, you know what? I read this article. I think that maybe you should sell some here. You know why they're telling you to sell? Because they get paid when you transact. They got no clue where the stock market is going because they're going to call you in 3 days and be like, hey, I read this article. I think you should buy now. And you're just going to keep trading back and forth and handing over all your money to them. So I think Tom Lee does a great job. He's very bullish. 200K Bitcoin, hey, from his lips to God's ears. I hope that happens. But
he's saying that Bitcoin's in this IPO era. What's this Bitcoin IPO? What's going on with that?
He's just, look, basically there's a distribution happening, right? And if you look at... there's a bunch of large pools of capital who previously were not able to buy Bitcoin. Now they can. And in order for people to buy Bitcoin, think about it this way. If Bitcoin drops to $50,000, you selling your Bitcoin?
No.
Okay, I'm not selling either. There's a lot of Bitcoiners who aren't selling at 50K. Would you sell at 60K?
Nope.
Okay, neither would I. 100K? No, right? 110K? What? There's some number where eventually like, yeah, that's kind of a high number up there. Maybe I'll give you a couple coins, right? So if you think about it from that perspective, is the way to think about the market price is basically the market price is a clearing mechanism. When it hits certain areas, all of a sudden there's people who were holding, who were unwilling to sell, who are now willing to sell. And the reason why a price stops going up is because now we've reached a point where there's enough people willing to sell to enough people who want to buy. If there's more buyers than sellers, the price goes up. If there's more sellers than buyers, the price goes down. Welcome to math. Welcome to finance. So as we have seen is as the price has gone up, we've now hit this point somewhere between 105,000, 125,000. And the reason why we're oscillating between in that range is that there's lots of Bitcoin trading hands back and forth between the people who have been holding for a long time, especially people who've been holding for more than 4 or 5 years, with the people who are now showing up and saying, hey, I want to buy this Bitcoin. But every time Bitcoin drops below 100K, that thing gets bid right back up. And there's this really, really persistent, strong demand going into Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin did this one time before in recent history, did it right around $8,000 to $10,000. It kept kind of oscillating in that range. There was this trading of hands, and then all of a sudden, bam, we went up a lot. I don't know if that's going to happen this time or not. It does look like in the market, there's kind of more of this grind up more than these like parabolic blow off tops. But what I do think is that it is very hard to be bearish long-term on Bitcoin. And in the medium term, when you have this many institutions pouring capital into the market, I think it's very hard to be bearish there too. And so if you're somebody who's worried about what's Bitcoin's price tomorrow, I can't help you. You know, what do they say? You know, God bless you, right? Just give them their right and say, hey, you're on your own on that one. But if you're somebody who's medium to long-term interested in Bitcoin, you're not going to sell, you're thinking long-term, chill out. What do you care? Does it matter if it's 109, 111, 108, or 112 today? No, stop looking. Just wait. The price is going to be fine. It's going to be good. That's the problem, is that now everyone Remember I told you that we all got these supercomputers? Guess what these supercomputers have? They got a freaking ticker on it that just blinks in our face all day long. So people all freak out, right? Just everyone chill out. It's going to be fine.
Stay on tech. Microsoft CEO recently said that they got NVIDIA chips, GPUs sitting on the shelves, right? Yeah. They're saying that it's not a supply problem. It's an energy demand or energy problem. Do you agree? Do you see the same thing?
Well, so not everyone, many people thought that the chips were going to be the big bottleneck, right? Could NVIDIA create enough GPUs? Could other people step in, TSMC, et cetera, right? All throughout the supply chain. This was going to be the big limiting factor. Now, what becomes interesting is not everyone believed that, but a lot of people believe that. And every time that somebody said they were making a big investment in AI, all of a sudden NVIDIA stock would run, all these companies would run. Now everyone's like, hey, actually, I know Jensen. I can just call him up and he just sends me more GPUs. Like, that's not a problem. Doesn't mean that some people still don't struggle or that NVIDIA is not going to continue to go up. But it does mean that, okay, what is the new bottleneck? Well, the new bottleneck is powered data centers, right? You need space, you need power. Those are the two things. Well, if you need space and power, guess what you need? You need land. If you have land and you need space and power, guess what you need? You need energy infrastructure. Where's the substation? Where is the transmission lines? How do you actually get the data center in place? What is the racks? Who's going to operate it? Is it liquid cooled or air cooled? All these things go into it, right? People forget the way that I got into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies was in 2016. I bought some GPUs and I sent them to somebody in Washington State. And I said, plug these bad boys in. Had a little dashboard and I was mining Ethereum, Ether, at $5, $6, something like that. Pretty good. Now, started to learn a little bit. Okay, how's a GPU, how's a graphics card work, right? Okay, how does the power get there? What exactly is going on? Do you have backup power? What happens when it goes down? How do you fix this stuff? How do you cool it? Where are the fans placed? What's pushing the air? What's sucking the air? All this kind of stuff. Then I got real ambitious. Me and Jason Williams, this parabolic guy, right? Him and I, at the time, he was helping a company where they were taking used car tires and they were turning it into energy. They were turning it into oil. They were turning it into a bunch of commodities. They're basically taking the car tires, they were burning them in this self-contained unit, and they were breaking it down into its parts. Well, one of the outputs was it created energy. So we had the genius idea, well, why don't we just use this energy, which is off-grid, self-contained, self-reliant system where it's just dependent on the stock feed of the car tires and mine Bitcoin. So guess what we did? We went we were still doing Ether at the time. And so we got the graphics cards, we started setting it all up, right? Then all of a sudden we had this little room and it was a cinder block room. And we said, oh shit, it's going to get hot in here. It was burning in there, burning. You walk in, it's like a sauna. Okay, well, we got to get some air in here. So then we went and we started getting air and how to get the airflow in. So like we were in the weeds on how to do this stuff, right? And by the way, it wasn't exactly the most pretty operation, but it worked. And so as you start to understand this stuff, you realize that power is a huge thing. Land is a huge thing. What is the actual facility type, right? If you go into a traditional data center, that shit's nice. SOC 2, tier 3 data centers in Reston, Virginia, you eat off the floor. You got cooling coming out of the floor, out of the walls. It's amazing. You walk into like a Bitcoin miner in 5 or 10 years ago, it's not so nice. It's, we're trying to keep the thing running. Like, forget about eating off the floor. You might not even walk without your shoes on the floor, right? So as you start to understand this stuff, you realize that compute is the most valuable commodity in the world.
We are in an economic boom right now, right? The market's been up 6 months in a row, and that's only happened 6 times since 1928. We all know what happened in the 1930s. Obviously, we had Black Monday, and then preceding a terrible decade.
Well, what's funny is there's a lot of things that you could say to a man and really offend him. You could use the F word, the D word, the S word. There's probably words I don't even know, right? You could say really kind of just like get at somebody. But then there's words that they just cut through and they just there's no recovering. And one of those words is silly. If you call a grown man silly, like, man, he's just like, damn, I don't got to come back, right? The people who think we're not in an economic boom, they're silly. Think about what's going on now. I think the S&P is up something like 16%. NASDAQ's up 23% year to date. We've got a plethora of profits. There are companies growing like gangbusters. We have a private sector that is going and innovating. We got a man who's launching reusable rockets into the sky. We're the only people in the world who could do that. We got literally Anduril and all these private tech defense companies that have literally taken cameras and put it in the eyeballs of soldiers, put them on the battlefield and said, now you got night vision, you got heat vision, and you are going to be undefeated. Then you go and you look at drones, you look at biotech, you just go through. We have somebody who is literally making it rain. How are you telling me that we are not in an economic boom? We got people who are trying to create energy from the sky, from the wind, from the earth, from water, trying to do nuclear, all this stuff. Everyone calm down, look around you. The single greatest time to be alive would be tomorrow. The next best time is today. Every single human in the history of humanity would love to live right now. You have a supercomputer in your pocket where you could just type on a piece of glass and send messages to millions of people in seconds. You can do anything with this. All of human knowledge is stored in this device.
But one more thing I want to stay on with the recession argument is the Fed obviously cut interest rates by 25 basis points going into December. Do you think they should have another cut? Powell seems to be kind of flip-flopping. He doesn't really know. He's kind of leaning towards maybe not cutting now. What do you think they should do, and what do you think they're going to do?
Powell is allergic to Donald Trump. That's what I think is actually happening. Is Jerome Powell will be cutting rates to 1% if Trump said to raise them. That's straight up. That's what I think, right? I think that it is super political. It's always been political. It's not a Powell thing. It's not a Trump thing. I think that Powell was being political when Biden was in office. I think that other people were being political before him. It's always been political. Now, with that said, another really interesting thing is that people don't talk enough about the Federal Reserve and the Treasury. Scott Bessent, we were talking about him. He went on television. That man, he goes on TV. What did Trump say? He soothes the market. Mr. Soothe the market, right? He goes on, he's slick, right? Got his hair perfect. He's got the glasses on and he starts just talking. He's just like, hey man, that guy's in charge. I feel good about it. But what happens when the Treasury and the Fed are working against each other? Jerome Powell versus Scott Bessent, because that's happening at times. Scott Bessent thinks that interest rates should be lower. Scott Bessent thinks that the government is going to continue to contract spending. Scott Bessent thinks that the economy is strong. Scott Bessent thinks that inflation is not coming back. So if that's what Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, one of the most important people in the administration, believes, what the heck is Jerome Powell doing? Jerome Powell has got, you know what he has on? You ever seen him wear his glasses? I think that he's got drunk goggles on. You know how you put the glasses on and it makes things look like you're drunk? That's what I think Jerome Powell's doing. I think he's got drunk goggles on because he wants to see a world of inflation. He wants to see a world where he doesn't have to cut interest rates. But all he keeps seeing when he looks at the data is, I should probably cut rates. The problem is that means that the president of the United States gets his way and Powell don't want to do that. And so that's where you get the gridlock is this Jerome Powell, who's allergic to Donald Trump. And if Donald Trump literally came out and said, let's raise rates, Powell would cut them faster.